Thanks so much for that kind introduction, Maggie, and welcome all of you to this webinar today on 5 ways to beat job boards and search firms. So just a few more things about me. I won't bore you, but I do have over 30 years of experience. I changed careers 3 times. First, I was a teacher. Then I became a college administrator. Then I became an association manager, and then I became a career coach. So there's hope for everybody in terms of transferring your skills to a new job or a new career. So what are we going to talk about today? How do you respond to job board postings? What's a job board? It's something you see on LinkedIn, Monster, Indeed, Google. How do you get to the top of the pile? What do you need to know in order to get noticed? What do you do after you submit your application? Then we're going to talk about search firms. What are the 2 types of search firms? How do you work with a search firm and a recruiter? How do you build a relationship with a recruiter? And then how do you respond when a recruiter calls you? So let's get started. Job boards. How many people do you think are going on LinkedIn and using LinkedIn for jobs? There are 660 million people on LinkedIn. Now, not all of them are job seekers, but that's a lot of competition. How many people do you think go on Monster? There are 12.1 million unique visitors, users of Monster. There are 12.3 million users of Indeed. There are 11.3 million users of Career Builder. So when you answer ads online, you are in a pool of many, many candidates. And this is how it goes by the numbers. For every job that's posted, maybe 2,000 or more people see it. 200 people start doing their application online. Maybe 100 people complete the application. Of those 100 applications, 75 are tossed out. Maybe 25 resumes remain. A human being gets to look at those resumes and pick 6 to 10 people to interview, and then another few to become finalists, and then one person is offered the job. 80% of people who are offered a job take it. So not even everyone who's offered the job actually takes the job. So what does that mean for you? Only 10% of jobs are actually found online, because there's a hidden job market, which we're not going to discuss today, but just to say that if you're looking for a job, only spend 10% of your weekly time on answering ads online, because there are hundreds of applicants, and they use what's called ATS, or Applicant Tracking System. Most companies use this system, whether you go on LinkedIn or Monster or Indeed, or even if you apply directly on a company website. Behind that website is this ATS that's going to compare your resume to the job description. And if there isn't an 85 to 90% match, then no human being is ever going to look at your resume. So what are the things you need to do? What does this mean? When you combine this information, there's 2 things you need to know. One is, if you see a job online, you need to apply within the first 3 to 4 days. Otherwise, it's locked out. They don't, even if it's posted for a week or a month, they will not accept any more applications. Second thing, apply before 10 a.m. in the employer's time zone. So you have to think of time zones. I'm in the Eastern time zone, but if you're in Chicago, that's an hour earlier, or Austin, Texas is an hour earlier, or other places could be 2 or 3 hours earlier. And then the third thing, which I didn't list here, the third important thing is try to network into that company through your network of connections. See if you can find a person to write to directly, the hiring manager, the person who's in charge of that department. So in addition to applying online, you actually send a resume to a real human being in that company. Unadvertised jobs are a hidden job market. They account for about 80% of hires. 80% of jobs are not listed. 80% of the hires are going to jobs that are not advertised online. So that's important to know, again, that you don't spend all your time answering ads on the internet. Okay, so we did this, but I'll repeat it. Let's say 144 million people are looking. Every job, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people see it. 200 start the application, 100 complete the application. The application artificial intelligence system, or maybe it's the human resource department, throws most of them out. They look at 25 and maybe they pick 6 to 10. Then they pick a few people to come back for the second interview. Then they pick 3 people to come back for the third interview, and then they offer the job. So what are the different kinds of job boards? There's social media job boards like LinkedIn or Google. There's an aggregator. Aggregator means it's a job board that includes jobs from all sorts of industries. Indeed is an example. Monster is an example. Google is an example. Then there are some niche job boards that are specific to a particular industry or specific to a particular job title. For example, DICE is for technology. Media Bistro is for marketing. Then you will find that most professional organizations, the associations for a profession, will list the jobs on their own website. So, public relations, association executives, chartered financial analysts, managers, doctors, marketing people. Each of these professions has an association, and these are examples of some of the associations, and you can find open jobs on their websites, not to work for the association, but to work in the industry. Inside look at the companies. You know, you've all heard of Glassdoor. Glassdoor is a great place to look for people's comments about a company, people who have worked there, who can give you the insider's view, the pros and cons, the culture, the salaries, potential questions. And then, of course, each company often has openings listed on their job site. So P&G or PricewaterhouseCoopers, or you name the company, Johnson & Johnson, they all have jobs listed on their website. So maximize your time that you use to find the jobs on the job boards. If the job boards account for only 10% of filled positions, you should be maximizing your job search time by networking, building your network, making new contacts, and by writing directly to a hiring manager at a company. Who is the hiring manager? It's not the human resource person. The hiring manager is someone 1 or 2 levels above you. So it could be a manager, it could be a director, it could be a managing director, it could be a vice president of marketing, vice president of finance, vice president of IT. You do want to spend more of your time writing directly to these hiring managers. Also on these websites, you can set up a job alert. So you don't have to go into the website every day. When you set up your job alert, it will send the jobs to you. So that saves you some time. Respond to the positions where you meet 85 to 90% of the qualifications. Because if you don't meet all those qualifications of education, hard skills, soft skills, then the ATS, the applicant tracking system, will throw out your resume and no one will get to see it. So they use algorithms. The Human Resource Department writes the job description. As you know, they put in the desired keywords, the roles, the responsibilities, the phrases. And then your application is scanned and scored by the applicant tracking system. And only the people who have the highest scores are considered. Here's an example. If the job application says Excel, PowerPoint, and you write on your resume, Microsoft Office Suite, guess what? The ATS system cannot read that. So it will put an X next to it. Oh, you don't have those skills. If you're writing healthcare and you write it in 2 words instead of 1 word, or 1 word instead of 2 words, the applicant tracking system cannot do it. Okay? It won't accept it. So you really need to be very careful and very specific when you write your resume, you fill out the application. You really need to use the exact words that you see in the job description. So how do you optimize your application? First, you tweak your resume. You put in the job title of the position you're going for, not your current job title. Use keywords, phrases, and responsibilities that are in the job description. If you have acronyms, you better spell them out, because the applicant tracking system doesn't understand what those letters mean. Use a PDF document, not a Word document. Some places will say use a Word, not a PDF. Do not use graphs. Do not use charts. Do not use designs. Do not use columns, because the ATS system cannot read that information. So no graphs, no charts, no designs, no columns. Now, often an online application will ask you to put in your salary. This is a trap. Either you can give a big range, but if they don't allow you to give a range, just type in $100 or $1,000. Because you don't want to knock yourself out. You want to make sure that you have an opportunity to get the interview. And so if you put in a salary that's too high, they won't talk to you. If you put in a salary that's too low, they'll think, well, this person doesn't have enough experience. That's why they're putting in a low salary. So you want to game the system by putting in a small number like this. Attach a cover letter, even if they don't ask for one. And the cover letter should be in the email you send them, or as an attachment if they're looking for attachments. The first paragraph include the position title, where you found the position, and the date that you found it. In your second paragraph, a summary, why you're the best candidate. You have the best skills. You have skills in organizing, analyzing, data collection. Third paragraph, your requirements and how they meet the requirements of the job and how you're qualified to do the job. And in this, you could put 2 columns. You're requiring this, and I have that. So this way, there's an exact comparison between your qualifications and the job description. And then the last paragraph is the closing statement. I'm certain that my experience in blank would make a unique contribution to your meeting your bottom line. I look forward to further discussion, or I look forward to an interview. Now what? So let's say you applied. You went through this process. You applied online. Use all the resources you have to identify someone who works at that company. Go through your network. Go through LinkedIn. Maybe it's a friend of a friend of a friend. Contact that person to let them know that you have applied for the position. Ask that person if they would be willing to recommend you for the position. Ask that person if they know the name of the hiring manager. The object is to strive to have someone in the company refer you to the hiring manager. And then you send a cover letter in email and a resume to that hiring manager. So when you apply online, it's really a 2-step process. First, you apply online. Then you network your way into the company and write directly to the hiring manager. So here's a summary. If you're a strong match for the job, you tweak your resume to make sure, you attach a cover letter, and you network into the company. So before we continue, Maggie, are there any questions about online job boards?
Yes, Amy, I did see some questions that came in. The first one is asking if we can put page numbers in the footer of our resume, or does that throw the ATS off?
Good question. Do not use footers or headers on your resume for an ATS system. Often people will put their name, cell phone, and email address in a header and then repeat it on each page. Forget about headers and footers. Just type your name in, center it on the page. Next line, type in your cell phone and your email address. The ATS system cannot read footers and headers. Good question. Next question, please.
Okay, great. This question is asking if you can show that summary slide.
If I can show the summary slide. I am showing. It says job board summary. Is that the slide they want or another slide?
Let me see. I'm waiting for clarification. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And then there is another question about a recruiter. Did you want to wait for that, or should I ask you that one now?
Let's wait and see if I answer it during the session, and then if not, we'll come back to it.
Okay. Can I ask you one more question related to what you've covered so far? Okay, this one says, I usually use a table to put dates to the right of the page. Could I use tabs instead so that the ATS reads my resume, or should I leave dates off?
Use a tab. You need to put in dates. Do use a tab. Do not use a table.
Okay.
All right.
We'll save that other recruiting question for you as well.
Thank you, Maggie. So now let's turn to working with search firms. Don't forget, the primary goal of a search firm is to have a successful placement. The recruiter wants to build relationships with their clients. That's the company that's doing hiring, so that they get future business from that company. They want to build a talent bank of viable candidates whom they can supply to different companies. So a recruiter or a search firm is biased towards candidates who will represent them well, and they're biased towards passive or employed candidates. That's just a hint. If you're working, you should be talking to recruiters even while you're working, because you never know when an opportunity may come up. That's not to say that you shouldn't talk to a recruiter if you are unemployed. Absolutely. You should talk to a recruiter if you're unemployed as well. Two types of search firms, and this is very important. When you work with a search firm, you need to ask them, are they a retained search firm or are they a contingency? So a retained search firm means the employer is engaging the search firm on an exclusive basis. They're only using one search firm. They will pay the fee to the search firm in stages. And the search firm plays an integral role in managing the whole process from start to finish. They will have detailed information about the position, about the company, about the manager who's hiring. And ultimately, the retained search firm is the one that's going to decide which candidates they're going to send to be interviewed by the company. So it's a good thing to work with retained search firms. At least you know they're the only search firm the company's working with, and you're not competing with a bunch of other search firm candidates. The other hand, the contingency search firm. An employer may engage more than one search firm, and the fee is paid only if a placement is made. Often that fee could be 15 to 20% or even 30% of the salary. Their role is limited to submitting candidates. They don't have control over who the company is going to interview. All they have control over is the candidates that they collect and they pick to send to the company. They may have less information about the position. They may have less information about the hiring manager. They may influence which candidates the company sees by sending them, but they don't decide the final decision because they're one of more than one recruiting company. So how do you work with a recruiter? Again, unless you're in a CEO, CFO, CIO position, it's called a C-suite position, You don't really want to spend a lot of time with search firms because only 10 to 15% of people actually get jobs that way. So if you have a senior role, if you work with recruiters in the past, if you know a recruiter who specializes in your industry or your particular job title, then you want to work with a recruiter. The recruiter is looking at you as a candidate. How marketable are you to their client company? That's what they're looking for, someone who they can present to their client. So use multiple strategies when you're working with the recruiters. Think about any recruiters you've worked with in the past. Ask your friends and colleagues, have they worked with any recruiters? Did they like them? Did they do a good job? Are they professional? See if you know anybody who works in HR and human resources. They'll know names of recruiters. Look on LinkedIn and Google the search firms in your target market. It's very simple to go into Google and say, search firms in marketing, search firms in sales. I'm working with a client who's in a different city altogether, and I found 3 search firms in his industry that have offices in the city where he works. And so he's contacting them directly to have a conversation and share his resume. This is even without knowing if there is an opening that's appropriate for him. How do you qualify the search firm? A qualified firm is a search firm either you have worked with before in the past or some recruiter who has been recommended to you by a friend or a colleague or a former colleague. Now, once you've identified search firms, you want to look at the search firm's own website. What kinds of positions are they going for? What are the levels of the positions they're going for? When I was in college administration, I worked with a couple of search firms that only place people in college positions, dean's level and above. And you can also research the search firm through Google and Glassdoor. Just as Glassdoor, individuals are giving their opinion about a company they work for, they will also give an opinion about a recruiter that they have worked for. So it's always good to kind of get an inside picture of the recruiting company to see if it's the right one for you. So you're going to reach out now to all the search firms you know. The qualified recruiters, the qualified search firms, look for them on LinkedIn, send an email directly to the recruiter. Now, if you know someone who's worked with that firm before, you can ask that person to make the introduction. It's always better to get into a company or into a recruiter if you have a warm introduction, if someone you know can introduce you. If not, just do it. They're always looking for viable candidates. How do you build a relationship with the recruiter? You want to demonstrate to the recruiter that you are among the best candidates for this job. You need to have your 2-minute pitch ready. What's your pitch? Who are you? What's your background? What's a good skill, 2 or 3 skills? Give an example of an accomplishment, and what are you looking for? Share stories of successes. It's less effective to say, I'm a successful salesperson, than it is to say, I increased sales by 15% year after year over 3 years for X company. It's better to illustrate your success with a story, a short story of what was the problem, how did you solve it, and what was the result. A person listening to your story will then think of the words successful, innovative, creative, gets the job done. You don't have to use those words in your story. Then you need to find out from the recruiter, what are they looking for? What is a qualified candidate? What does their perfect candidate look like? And then after you share your resume and information about you, then you ask the recruiter, well, how do they see you? Are you a viable candidate for a particular position? Establish ground rules right up front about sending your resume. Some recruiters want you to give them your resume and they will send it on to the company. Sometimes they even redo it. They write a a portfolio. They take your resume, they interview you, and then they write a 5 or 6 page essay about you that they send to their client. So you need to find out upfront what they're looking for. And then after you've had your conversation with the recruiter, again, you follow up with a letter, email, of course, and stay in touch, because at that moment, there may not be a job opening that's appropriate for you. You want to continue the relationship with this recruiter so that in the future, whether it's a month from now or 3 months from now or January 21, there may be an opening and you're qualified for that opening. So let's say you have an interview with an employer. The recruiter sent you on an interview, you had the interview. Let the recruiter know how it went. Do you feel you did a good job? You didn't do a good job? They liked you? They didn't like you? You also need to follow up with an email to the hiring manager and any other person who has interviewed you. We don't call this a thank you letter because it's much more than a thank you letter. The follow-up email lets them know that you're very interested in the position. As I mentioned during the interview, my best skills are in X, Y, and Z. I understand that you have a challenge with such and such, and here's how I can help you solve that problem, or here's how I can help contribute to your bottom line, or here is how I can contribute to meeting the mission of your organization. Your follow-up email must highlight your skills and your accomplishments that are relevant to that position. Stay in touch with the recruiter regarding the next steps, because the company will tell the recruiter, oh yeah, we're going to bring this person back for a second interview or a third interview, or we're interested in offering this person a position. So let's say you go through the process. You get an offer. Discuss the offer with the recruiter. Maintain a good relationship with the recruiter. So in some cases, the recruiter wants to do the negotiation for you, and in other cases, you will do the negotiation directly, and you need to find that out. Can the recruiter get you what you want in terms of salary, benefits, prerequisites, perks? Are you concerned that the recruiter will not communicate your needs? Are you comfortable negotiating through an intermediary? So you need to do what's really best for you. If you think it's in your best interest to negotiate directly with the hiring manager, then tell the recruiter that's what you want. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So that's something you need to figure out and have a discussion with the recruiter. So another thing that can happen, recruiters and hiring managers are searching for candidates on LinkedIn, and they may find you. So let's say you get a call from a recruiter or an email from a recruiter. You need to be prepared with your 2-minute pitch, with your accomplishment stories. Ask the recruiter questions to learn more about the job, the roles and responsibilities, the company culture. What kind of recruiting company is this? How long have they been in business? How long has the recruiter worked for this company? And how did the recruiter find you? Having a strong LinkedIn profile, as I mentioned before, will bring more recruiters to you. So it's really important that after you work on your pitch and your resume, you work on your LinkedIn profile. That's another whole webinar. So, summary. Determine how you're going to use recruiters and plan how much time during the week of your whole job search you're going to spend on recruiters. Develop a search firm strategy. Develop the relationship with the recruiter. And be strategic about managing your relationship with the recruiter and the search firm. Remember, the job boards, 10% of people or less get jobs. Every time I do the hidden job market, I ask people who, I used to do this in person. I would have 65 people. I said, how many of you answer ads on the internet? Everybody raises his hand or her hand. How many get interviews? 10 out of 65. How many got jobs? 5. that's less than 10%. So don't spend more than 10% of your time answering ads online, and don't spend more than 10 to 15% of your time researching and talking to recruiters. Okay, questions, Maggie?
Thanks, Amy. I'll remind you, if you have a question, you can use the chat box, or you can also email info@saavyladies.org. And Amy, one of the questions for you is asking, what if a LinkedIn recruiter contacts you with a job that's not for you? Do you ignore it? How do you refuse without insulting the recruiter?
Okay, this is what I would say. I'm flattered that you contacted me for the position of such and such. However, this is not exactly what I'm looking for at this time. I would love to chat with you further. See if you can get a phone call meeting with the recruiter anyway. Not for this position, but maybe that recruiter will have other positions. So don't ignore anything that when someone comes to you, don't ignore it. If you get invited to an interview for a job that you're not really sure about, once you're invited, say yes. Why? Because every interview is a great practice for you for when you get an interview for the job you really want. So the more practice you have, the more confident you will feel when you get into an interview for the job you really want.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question says, I was told by a search firm that because I have only worked as an education attorney, they would not try to place me in a position in any other practice area. This is a problem for me because my specialty is very niche, and so I've been looking at other attorney jobs. Are other search firms likely to give me a similarly negative answer?
Well, the answer is you don't know till you ask them, but my guess is you should be going for jobs on your own and talking to firms where you want to work. And you convince them that your skills are transferable. Maybe you have litigation skills, or maybe you have deposition skills, or maybe you have interview skills. Your job is to show that your skills are transferable. It can't hurt to talk to a couple of other recruiters, but if you get the same answer from one or two more, then don't waste your time.
Okay, thank you. Next question is asking if a search firm decides not to submit your resume, could you apply on your own? Should you prepare for that contingency?
Yes. There's nothing wrong with applying if you have the name of a person to apply to. Once again, you don't want to just go through the website. Just because the search firm doesn't think you're appropriate, in fact, you may very well be appropriate. So yes, you can try that. If you really feel this is a job you want, that you would be good at, and you have the qualifications for. Search firms don't always make the right decisions. I'll give you an example about human resources. When I was a manager at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, I needed to hire someone. I wrote the job description. I gave it to human resources. They posted it wherever they posted it, and they got in a flood of resumes, and they screened the resumes and sent me a few names, and I really didn't like anybody they chose. So I went downstairs and I said, yeah, could I look at your folder of, the people who sent in resumes? They said, of course. And I looked through it and I found 3 people, one of whom I interviewed all 3 of them, one of whom I ultimately hired. So sometimes people don't have the best idea of who makes the best candidate. And so it doesn't hurt for you to go directly to the hiring manager.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Good tips. This question is asking about resumes, if it should be PDF only.
If they ask for a PDF, then send it. Otherwise, just do a Word document. I think, it depends on what the ATS can read, but Word documents, anybody can read. Anything can read a Word document.
Okay. Another question for you says, is it okay to connect via LinkedIn with interviewers? Would before or after they make a decision be best?
That gets a little dicey. If you've interviewed for a position and you're still in the process, You can ask to connect to them on LinkedIn. Okay, you say, oh, I'm interviewing for the position of, I'd like to connect to you. You see if they connect to you. Certainly if you've been offered the position, of course you connect. If you go through the interview process and you're not offered the position, you can still ask to connect just in a professional way to build your network. So again, people can always say no, and then you just drop it. The easiest people to connect to are people who are alumni from your school, your university or college, because alumni recognize, oh, you're another alum. And so if you're looking for jobs in certain industries, it's a good idea to research your college or university on LinkedIn and look at alumni, and look for your city, and look at the companies where the alumni work. And then you can introduce yourself and ask to connect on LinkedIn. And that's a good way to get into a company, through an alumni. Even if you don't know that person, the fact is, oh, we're both alums from XYZ University. I'd love to connect.
Okay. Amy, I think this is the last question, and it's wondering, what are your thoughts on writing a normal cover letter versus one that really stands out? Does it depend on the industry?
I don't know what you mean by a normal cover letter versus one that stands out. All I can say about cover letters is you must tailor and customize your cover letter for each job. Every time you apply for a job, whether it's through an application online or it's directly to a company or to a hiring manager, you must tailor your cover letter. There is no such thing as one cover letter fits all.
Okay. Thank you. I believe those are all of the questions that we have for you, Amy. So I want to thank you for presenting today, and we will share Amy's contact information with everyone in our follow-up email. I'm seeing some messages coming in thanking you, Amy, with all the great tips and the helpful information. So thank you so much, Amy, for educating us today on this topic, and I know it's very needed right now. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Maggie. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with the Savvy Ladies people. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.